Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month, get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat rooms, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today. Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And here we are, this episode, spring practice, week 1, under the books for the Gators. So, hey, now we're going to shift to the defensive side of the ball. We've heard a lot from the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line, a little bit on defense, but now, for the first time, we get to hear from defensive coordinator Austin Armstrong as he spoke to the media on Saturday. He had lots to say. That means we have lots to get into here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. Billy Napier also spoke to the media, so really heavy episode dealing with the defense and getting his thoughts on the defense so far the first week of spring practice from Billy Napier and Austin Armstrong, and also defensive players Jaydon Hill. Excuse me, allergies are getting to me with all the pollen out there. But also Justus Boone also spoke this past week, not on Saturday. Jaydon Hill spoke on Saturday along with Napier and Armstrong. Boone a little bit earlier, but of course, defensive emphasis on this episode here of Gators Breakdown. Later on this week, we'll get into the running game. Jabbar Jaluk spoke to the media as well. The backs, Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne. So that'll be it about this week on Gators Breakdown. Spring break coming up for the Gators. I'm also going to try to take a little bit of a step back as we get into spring break this week too, personally, for my daughter and stuff. So spend some more time with her coming up this week. So that'll kind of be the outline coming up on these episodes of Gators Breakdown. As I said, excuse me, pollen's out there. So if there's some pauses, if there's watery eyes, sneezes going on, you may hear some pauses. You may see a random graphic thrown up. If you're watching this live on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. But hopefully you won't have to see me, struggling a bit, probably like some of you are out there as well, as we are right here in Florida, full spring mode already. I mean, it's been that way for about a month now, so it's really hitting me right now. But everybody, all right, plenty to get into. But before we do, one more time, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're watching this live on YouTube. Check this out on Gators Breakdown Plus. A lot of conversation going on the last couple of days with Austin Armstrong speaking to the media, of course, and getting his thoughts for the first time out there as he takes over for Patrick Toney. Keep that conversation going on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. Link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. So, all right, let's get straight to it. Billy Napier, Austin Armstrong on this transition of him being the new Gators defensive coordinator.
Yeah, no, it's been really positive, and I think year 2, there's enough carryover systematically to where I think Austin's learning what they know, putting his spin on it, and then certainly taking his approach from a personality standpoint, but. It's important to know here, I think, not only all the players in the second year, but all the coaches as well, right? So just in terms of our year-round plan, much more comfortable with how to allocate their time. And then we've added a lot of really new players on that side of the ball. So, I've been very pleased. That group is off to a good start.
What do you remember about Austin when because he was a GA at Louisiana when you got there, right? Did he make an impact on you pretty early?
Yeah, no, we retained him, and then he spent the first year with us. He worked closely with Ron Roberts and the inside backers. Made a great impression on us. Obviously, Ron was the coordinator. He was a GA, so he, had a little bit more responsibility than maybe a typical GA. Felt strongly about him. And, obviously at that point, Kirby and I had known each other, and we communicated about getting him there and, being in our system to some degree, if that makes sense, so that year was beneficial at Georgia for him. our inside backer job came open, we brought him back immediately. So, and Patrick obviously was promoted to DC, felt strongly about Austin, we brought him back. So, and then 1 year later, the guy's calling defenses. So he's a good one.
An opportunity to come work here in an elite institution on and off the field, to be with Coach Napier, to be with his staff, to be associated with the University of Florida, it's a no-brainer. And God's been good to us, and we're very excited to be here and ready to go.
What was that conversation like with Nick Saban? I mean, just to tell him that, hey, look, this is a great opportunity, and how supportive was he?
Well, it was phenomenal. It was the easiest decision to make, but it was a hard decision. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm a lifelong learner. I have the ultimate respect for the game of football, and opportunity to work for him. Our defensive system derives from that system that he and Coach Belichick created about 30 years ago with the Browns. And opportunity to be there in that role, to work with that staff and those people at that place, a phenomenal opportunity. But he was very supportive. That was an intimate conversation that I don't want to go there with, but he was phenomenal. And gave me a lot of good advice, pros and cons. But it was a privilege to be there and a privilege to work there. But the opportunity to come here to be with Coach Napier is something you can't pass up. I got into coaching because I wanted to help young people to become positive contributors to society, right? And I'm going to coach our guys, right? But I don't think you can coach a player until you have a relationship with them. So that's kind of been hard for me during this transition of, you just go straight into it, and I'm trying to meet everybody. I'm meeting the new staff and stuff like that because my main objective is to take each individual on our team and make them the best version of themselves, right? Because if the individual is great, we're going to have collective success, and we all benefit from that. And if we have collective success, each individual benefits from that, and I try to be very personal with them, because I don't think you can push people to be the best they can unless they know you're coming from a place of love. And when you have a real relationship with somebody, it's going to be up and down. It's not going to be perfect, right? There's going to be some days that they're tired of me, and Troop, some days I'm tired of them. But if they know that I respect them, they respect me, we communicate with each other, and we trust each other, you can do that. We're very, very multiple. We base, out of a 3-3-5 per se, but we're really a 4-2. Because that's what modern football is. We don't have a toolbox. We like to say we have a tool shed of scheme. You know what I mean? Our deal is we're going to be multiple 4-down front team that play split safety, man match, and middle field close coverage. We're going to pressure, with the word creeper gets thrown around, right, which is a 4-man pressure versus the pass and a 5-man pressure against the run. So it's a mixture of a fire zone and a cover 3 cover concepts. We do some other stuff on a 5-man process that's different at a 4-down front and 3-down front. At the end of the day, not many people are like us that are multiple in the back end and multiple in the front end. They're kind of one or the other, right? We're both. We're going to be able to take whatever tools we need every week to play in this league, because each team's different. Vanderbilt's different than Georgia. Georgia is different than Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? And you got to have a scheme that is flexible to what you're seeing all the time, but also what your players can do. I can't come in here and say, hey, we're going to be a 4-man front middle field close team. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? But we have the ability to play each week the way we need to play to win. And really for us, it's the same every week, and it's different for the opponent. You know what I'm saying? But from a pressure standpoint, we are aggressive. You know what I mean? We say we try to negotiate with a hammer, right? We're going to be aggressive. We're not going to let them dictate the terms of engagement. We're going to be able to run all our stuff against all circumstances of offense. We feel like we have a good run pressure philosophy and relative to the pass game.
There we go. And this is almost like elevating within the staff, just because he's been so familiar with Billy Napier. There's a relationship there, and as he said, he has to get the relationships down with the players, and of course the coaches as well. But more importantly, the players, and he has to learn, how to attack each player, mentally. As a coach, that's just part of it, more than just football. But there's a mental aspect to this too. But it's almost like elevate within the staff, because he runs a familiar defense that Patrick Toney did, and we'll get into what some of the players think about that as well. But at least he has coaches that have been here: Corey Raymond, Spencer, Bateman, Peterson. Those guys to lean on to figure out what these players can do, can't do, what they struggle with, what they need help with. He has now that to fall back on. It's not all brand new for him. So it being pretty much the same defense. Now tendencies will change, of course, as we've said before. His attitude would change. His approach would change about maybe pressure and how much he brings pressure. And it's the same defense as Georgia and what Patrick Toney was bringing to Florida last year, and a lot of what Alabama has run. That little you heard Napier say it. There's a little system of coaches there between Napier and Kirby Smart and Nick Saban and all those defensive coaches, Ron Roberts, and of course everybody who's kind of derived from him. Toney being one, Dave Aranda being another one. I mean, all these guys talking. There's that little circle there of those coaches that run very similar defenses. So at least with now Armstrong coming in, it's not a lot of change. But at least player-wise, to figure out, he's not walking in completely blind. This isn't a whole brand new defensive staff that has to relearn. This is a third defensive coordinator for these players, but at least these players, besides Armstrong, have the other coaches along with them. So this will make the transition faster. The defense really isn't changing, and there's coaches who have been here that can help the communication aspect of all those assistants that are now going to be under Armstrong. They can share what they learned last year, what they've put on film, what they've learned in the offseason from the bowl game now to spring practice starting. All that can be relayed to Austin Armstrong, where this transition is not going to be that big of a transition. It might be the third defensive coordinator for these players in the last 3 years, but as I said, it's a lot of almost like elevating within the staff here. So Armstrong did speak on the changes being made to the defense after Toney's departure, and as I said, he said this was off the interview. Some other stuff he said. There will be some minor changes in terminology, but he wants to change for the team, not the other way around. He came in that very first meeting. He goes, "Look, there's a lot of anxiety. He knows this is the third defensive coordinator in 3 years. He wants to change for the players. It's the same defense now. He might have some different wording than Patrick Toney had, but he'd rather him learn the wording that the players are used to than making all the other players have to adjust and adapt again. He'll adapt around them." And he gave an overview of what he wants out of the defense. You heard some of that there, but a Florida DNA. He's quote, "We want to talk about the Gator DNA. We want to be tough, and tough isn't acting like a fool. It's striking blockers, being mentally tough to handle situational football. We want physicality." Right? That's definitely something we want to see in here. We're going to hunt the ball. We're going to punish the ball carrier. And he added, he wants his players to play with enthusiasm rather than anxiety they have been playing with. So that's something that probably we can glean from what he's saying there. That last part, want to play with enthusiasm rather than the anxiety they have been playing with. That lets me know that's that message. The message is there that, hey, we're afraid to mess up, and everything's new. Players out there not playing confident. They're anxious. They're playing with anxiety out there, and we hoped that would go away last year just because of Todd Grantham not being the defensive coordinator, Patrick Toney coming in and implementing his style of defense. But it looks like a lot of anxiety with some of those players that were Mullen guys and previous staff guys. There's probably a good thing now that you're starting to get the mindset of Napier players in there. There's a lot of transfers and a lot of guys who were on the team last year as true freshmen, now being their second year. Maybe some of that anxiety goes away. They've learned this defense. They know this defense a bit better. Now maybe that final step of getting over that anxiety is maybe some of the messaging that Austin Armstrong can change from Patrick Toney. That last little part, him sharing that and putting it out there, that the anxiety they have been playing with, he's got to get that relationship down with those players and build some confidence. That's the biggest thing for this defense, to start building some confidence. And I thought we had got to a point last season where we saw it. Now, granted, Texas A&M wasn't a great offense. South Carolina wasn't a great offense, but Florida wasn't a great defense either. And they finally showed up in a couple of games right there in the middle of the season, only to kind of fall back down a bit, not able to handle the positivity that was coming their way, not able to handle the maybe somewhat expectations that came along with that 2-game stretch there. They weren't able to handle that. So you heard him get into the football, the schematic side of his defense, and a lot has been made. I've seen the comments in here the last couple of times that we've talked about Austin Armstrong, and this defense, whether it be a 3-man front or a 4-man front, and Armstrong has basically said, you heard him say it, basically a four-man front. And that's what we see a lot. So we're going to see a lot of that with this defense and odd and even fronts. And he mentioned how he's learned under Kirby Smart, and Ron Roberts, Dan Lanning, Pete Golding, Glenn Schumann, Patrick Toney. A lot of it would depend on personnel, of course. But as we saw it last year for Florida, up front, defensive end, nose tackle, defensive tackle, edge. You're kind of your four-man front there. 2 linebackers behind them, 5 DBs. And with modern offense, that's going to be a lot of your base defense. That's what you see out there. As you heard Armstrong say, quote, split safety, man match, middle of the field, closed coverage on the back end with pressure up front. With the use of creepers, 4-man pressure and pass, and 5-man and run, with either a 3-man front or 4-man front. And when last year, of course, Will and I, we went over the creepers a good bit with the hire of Patrick Toney last season. And it's certainly heard and used by those names I just mentioned too. But, going into what he was having to say there, split safety, meaning, you're splitting the coverage type that the safeties play, field, boundary position come into play there, whether it be man, whether it be zone, split between the 2 safeties. And that just the field boundary position that comes into play with what type of coverage you're asking your safeties to play. Man match, the defender has a man but may take another man based on a set of rules. Do you stay with your man or pass him off to another defender based on a route or receiver runs? And there's a good bit of mostly cover 3 in Armstrong's defense, but you heard him say middle of the field close, usually meaning a safety in the middle of the field, closing that middle of the field off as much as possible. So that's his base defense. Of course, he'll mix it up like good defensive coordinators do. You heard him say that, depending on who they play. Tennessee's offense is not the same as Vanderbilt's offense. It's not the same as Georgia's offense, not the same as LSU's offense. It'll change. But that'd be you'll have a little bit of a base defense to go by. And I look at it, what wrinkles will Armstrong have compared to a Patrick Toney? Compared to, we know it's no surprise that Georgia defense, that's the model, and that's the model he's learned under. As you heard Billy Napier and him say, he went to Georgia in 2019. He went and learned under Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning. That's, he's going to take a lot from those guys. But what wrinkles are his own? Because it may be at base what Georgia runs on defense, but we know Florida doesn't have that personnel. I'm a big fan of some of Florida's young personnel up front. McClellan up front, Des Watson up front, Shamar James being his second year, but Georgia's got 10 of those guys. Florida doesn't have the personnel to run exactly what Georgia runs. Nor the staff, in particular. Kirby Smart, best defensive mind out there along with Nick Saban. Will Muschamp, very known for his defensive mind, one of the best defensive minds in the country. Schumann there as a co-defensive coordinator. That's a great defensive staff. So Florida doesn't have the personnel nor the staff. But what you're hoping is you close that gap with a hire like Armstrong paired with Corey Raymond. And maybe Florida will be there at one point when they get that personnel there and you start looking at that staff. They recruit at a certain level and you start thinking of Spencer and Raymond and Armstrong together, Bateman together as something close to that Georgia staff. But we can admit to ourselves, Florida's nowhere near that right now. That's the best defensive staff in the country right now. But at its base, that defense is going to look a lot like that defense. Personnel staff's not there, but what does Armstrong add to this defense that makes it his own for success? Word is a Cameron Jackson, a transfer that comes in here. He's a disruptive force so far this spring on the defensive line. How does he help somebody like Austin Armstrong? Caleb Banks is coming along nicely as a transfer. And you add that to the development of a Des Watson and Chris McClellan, I think Florida's front's going to be better to help Armstrong. A deeper front, I think, for Armstrong compared to last year. But it will be interesting to see how he can use the depth like that. His experience as a linebacker coach. Corey Raymond now taking over for the complete secondary. How do these little wrinkles add up to, you can't go out there and run Georgia's defense. You don't have that talent. But what can you do to make up for it? I'm not expecting year one or year two for that matter to come in here and start looking equal to that Georgia defense. But if he's a good enough coach right away, we should see some improvements. So I mean, I don't know. We don't know what wrinkles. Of course, he likes to bring pressure, but what does he do to adapt to the personnel? You heard him say it. We don't know that yet. We're only 1 week in the spring practice. He's only 2 weeks on the job, basically. We'll have to wait till Florida plays some ball games to kind of figure out what he'll do compared to what he did at Southern Miss, what he's learned under all those coaches. How much does the personnel Florida have change what he's done so far and the wrinkles he'll bring? That's a question one can ask right now, but not necessarily answer. But you heard what he likes to do as a base defense. We'll see how far that takes Florida. All right, let's hear from some players. Jaydon Hill, Justus Boone on the transition from Patrick Toney to Austin Armstrong.
He came in with energy. I ain't gonna lie. Like, out the gate, his first message, like, we came in there, he got us fired up. Like, you know what I'm saying? We sitting back in our seats. Like, when he got to talking, we leaned up a little bit, like, okay, yeah. Like, I could tell he mean business, you know what I'm saying? I feel like in this conference that we playing, like, most of the defenses, it's a universal defense, you know what I'm saying? It's just on how you call it and, like, little tweaks and adjustments. So it's not really much different than what we already know. It's just, like, you know what I'm saying, different terminology to an extent. Some of it is just different terminology, but this is like my third coordinator, so it's like at this point I'm more so of a, you know, I'm just ready to accept whatever, you know what I'm saying? Because at the next level it's only worse. So I mean, yeah, it's football.
Most definitely, I agree. A lot of high energy, a lot of running up and down the field, constantly yelling. Not all bad stuff, good stuff most of the time. You just love everybody to move around, love making sure that we attacking everything with all we got.
When you look at his track record at Southern Miss, a lot of sacks, is that something that excites you as a defensive lineman?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that he did a whole lot of good things where he come from. He's a young guy. He did a lot of production that, you feel me, being a young guy, stuff like that. So that's good for him. It shows what kind of mindset he has, and we ready to attack whatever he puts at us.
He was a graduate assistant or PT at UL, so it was like the language, the verbiage, kind of the same, or how much is changing with him?
No, almost everything, schematics, the schemes, everything pretty much the same. A little tweaks in here and there, but most of everything's good. I just know the first day he came in that he was really stressing that he wants us to be really punctual, make sure that we are really aggressive and always attacking our stuff. Don't just be casual with it. Make sure we attacking with everything we got.
Attack with everything you got. Be punctual. I mean, you like what you hear. I mean, of course, all these are words right now. And the one that we all took away from this and hearing Austin Armstrong earlier was negotiate with a hammer. I mean, it sounds good. It sounds really good on the surface. You know, now we have to see it. And now through spring, and you can hear it through the players. They can tell right away the energy is better. I mean, through the first meeting, you hear Jaydon Hill, oh, okay, we're relaxed. And his energy kind of just made us sit up a bit. We want to listen. We're buying in to what Austin Armstrong is telling us and selling us. Hopefully that translates. Hopefully that translates into some confidence. This defense absolutely needs it. Third different voice that they have to hear now as a defensive coordinator in the last 3 years, but there's not as much. You heard it from them. There's not that much of a change this year. Hopefully they feed off of this on the field as well. A little more aggressive. I'm eager to see, you know, this pressure and this. I mean, Florida was able to create some turnovers last year. That was something they were still pretty good at last year, but you know, the sack numbers weren't necessarily there. And that doesn't tell us the whole story. And you go look at Georgia's defense if we're going to sit here, you know, maybe compare because of the coaching history and the little coaching circle that you heard Billy Napier reference earlier. But if you look at that defense, Georgia, go look at Kirby Smart's career since he's been there as head coach. And of course, he's very involved in that defense and through all their defensive coordinators. Georgia doesn't sack the quarterback a lot. They pressure a lot. They absolutely bring a whole bunch of pressure. Now, Florida didn't get to the quarterback a lot last year either, especially compared to a Todd Grantham defense. But that's the tricky thing. Florida was getting to the quarterback under Todd Grantham. But what did it amount to? Especially the first couple of years, 18 and 19, sacking the quarterback left and right. You know, up near, if I remember right, 40 sacks a year. But in the big games versus Georgia, versus LSU, sack numbers weren't there. But also, it didn't really mean much. It didn't mean much in big games. Georgia doesn't sack the quarterback a whole lot, but they sure as heck pressure. You better get rid of that ball. They make you get rid of the ball. So, you're only passing the ball down the field just a bit, just to get the ball out of your hands. And of course, their defensive backs are going to make a tackle. They're not missing tackles. So you're not passing the ball down the field on them a whole lot because the pressure's there. The offenses are not taking sacks. They're getting rid of the ball, but it doesn't matter. The Georgia defense, fast, relentless, making tackles. Could that be something we see this year with a more aggressive front? Or maybe it does turn into sacks, and the sacks actually mean something a bit more under this defense than they do at Georgia's defense or the previous defense under Todd Grantham. Or it creates more turnovers. Or they actually show up in bigger games. I mean, there's different ways to go about it. Just because Georgia doesn't get a lot of sacks, but it creates a lot of pressure, doesn't mean that's what it has to mean for Florida. I mean, sacks are great. How many sacks are on third down? So give me that stat at the end of the year. We'll see and compare. And that's another thing. How does he improve third down defense? Awful for Florida the last few years, no matter who the defensive coordinator has been. And we third and Grantham was a joke, and then the joke continued to third and Toney last year. I hope we don't have to make a third and Armstrong joke. But those are big. Those are the questions we're going to be dialed into. I mean, there's going to look like there's more pressure up front for Florida's defense, but what does that mean? Is the pressure going to get there? Is he bringing pressure? Is he bringing 5 guys? Is he bringing 4 guys, 5 guys on this defense? Even more sometimes. Are they getting home? Is that pressure creating turnovers? Is that pressure creating incomplete passes? Is it forcing quarterbacks to move their platform and throw off-target throws? Are they throwing the ball out of bounds? I mean, it doesn't have to be a sack every time. Sack numbers don't, as I said, again, don't mean everything. But how does it affect that opposing offense? Is it getting Florida off the field on third down? Is it making it 2nd and 10 instead of 2nd and 3? It's a chain reaction. Those are the little nuances and differences that I'm certainly looking for. And compared to Patrick Toney, Todd Grantham, to what Austin Armstrong, how does his pressure affect so many parts of the defense? All right, so let's keep it going here. And let's get to some players. Let's go to the linebacker spot. Here's Napier on Shamar James, Taraja Mitchell, and Scooby Williams.
First of all, Shamar was not a mid-year player last year, right? So he really showed up there late May, early June. So he's made even more progress, I think, year 1 to year 2. So not only mentally, I think, out there as a football player, but there's no question physically really bought into the nutrition, recovery, the strength and conditioning. Taraja's taking advantage of the opportunity there with Wingo being limited due to the surgeries, and then certainly Scooby's been a little bit limited as well, right? So Taraja is a former team captain at Ohio State. A guy's been around college football in a successful program. Very bright, very articulate, guy that, communicates at a high level. So he's making the others around him better with that communication. He's a big player. He's 245 pounds, and there's some physical presence there in the middle that I think he brings. He's playing in both rooms. He's playing Sam, in some of the bigger personnel groupings. So, and I do think he's got situational. He's a sub rusher. Scooby's 6'2.5". We threw him out there a little bit at the end of the year last year. I thought he's got a knack for rushing the passer. So, but I still think the guy can play inside backer, play Sam, sub rusher. Yeah. He was back today, did more than he's been doing, and flashed a little bit out there today.
There you go. That was, when he's referencing today, that was Saturday. The Gators spring practice, as you heard Scooby Williams back out there a bit more. And that's kind of some clarification that we get now. So you guys remember after the roster came out, we had the first spring practice. We spent some time on some position changes, and Scooby Williams was one that was on the roster that was listed as an edge. And we went into detail about that, as what that possibly means for him and his career of playing edge in high school and now maybe making that transition to give Florida some more depth at that edge position. And now we get some more clarification because throughout the week on Twitter, it was tweeted that, hey, there's Scooby Williams practicing with the inside linebackers and not the edge rushers. And Scooby retweeted it and said, I never moved. We'll say, now we get to ask Napier about it and some clarification on where is Scooby Williams playing. Well, now he's back out there and he is playing both the edge and the Sam inside linebacker spot. So we'll get some clarification there. A player now that can do both. And you kind of figured that might would happen even going back to our preview a couple of weeks ago in previewing spring practice of where Scooby Williams would play. And I figured he might play both and play some more edge this year. And he should. Florida needs some help there. But also, of course, it's going to matter on down and distance and the personnel you have out there. And if he can play both, great. I mean, it gives Florida some versatility there. And of course, as I said, a position that he played in high school, has some experience there. And now he goes back out there, and you heard Billy Napier say he's big enough to go play some inside linebacker, but he's still fast enough to play as an edge rusher, pass rusher. We'll put him in those situations. So there's some clarification from something that was kind of a big storyline as spring practice started, is Scooby Williams changing positions. Well, not necessarily just changing positions, but playing both edge and inside linebacker. Shamar James, good point there made by Billy Napier. He didn't go through spring practice last year. He came on as a May, June, summer enrollee, got up to speed so fast, that he's second level depth chart at the linebacker spot, mainly because of need there for Florida. Not a lot of experience at the linebacker spot last year behind Amari Burney and Ventrell Miller, but also that he showed ability to go be an all-SEC freshman as a linebacker. And now this is his first spring practice. Now he gets some more basics, some more learning experience there with Jay Bateman and now Armstrong coming in as well, sharing his knowledge at the linebacker spot. Shamar James going through spring, and also the winter workout. He didn't get that in last year, not being an early enrollee. So now getting in more shape. And how many years did we talk about, Amari Burney did show growth last year under Jay Bateman as a linebacker, but he didn't come in as a true linebacker. And it finally took his final season to get some positive, consistent play out of Amari Burney as a guy who didn't play linebacker, but was kind of forced to go to linebacker throughout his career. Not Shamar James. Shamar James came in as a linebacker. I think that's why we saw some success. But now we get to pair that with a winter conditioning and going through spring practice, learning, because he's got to be a leader now. There with Taraja Mitchell. You heard Billy Napier bring him up. These guys have to lead there, especially with Derek Wingo being limited on the sideline this spring, recovering from shoulder surgery. Need some guys to step up now. And now Shamar James, who played some linebacker in high school, you're not having to fit him in there. That's translating well. And also Taraja Mitchell being at Ohio State, learning big boy football, what it takes to get on the field. Played a lot a couple years ago. Hopefully now everything is okay with him, but good for him, I think, this spring to be able to get the experience with Wingo being sidelined. And Mitchell, James, we're going to hear a lot from those guys. It won't be surprised. I will not be surprised by the time the season rolls around, the season's playing out, we get to the end of the year, that those are going to be your top two guys. Even with Wingo's experience last year, he's another guy who was an edge in high school, and they won't necessarily say forced in. I mean, he was maybe projected to be a linebacker, not so much of an edge at a high school. But as I said, he wasn't. It takes a lot of instinct to play that linebacker spot and learn that linebacker spot. And we can go a little bit in high school, but was still known more as an edge. Well, not Shamar James. So it would not surprise me in the least with Mitchell's experience there at Ohio State, Shamar James' experience in high school, getting that 1 year under his belt last year, and now going through winter conditioning and now going through his first spring practice. Mitchell and James being the main two linebackers. And I won't be surprised by that. Wingo could have transferred, maybe. I think he still brings a lot of leadership off the field. And I think he'll play. He was playing, remember, he was playing hurt last year. He was playing hurt versus FSU, and I know a lot of people were having eyes on him because Ventura Miller was suspended for the first half of that game, and Wingo having to go. He was playing hurt in that game, and we all saw the bowl game where it seemed like he just could not. He was out there giving it his all, but obviously not 100%. I don't expect him to not contribute or anything like that, but I just think to Mitchell's experience at Ohio State, Shamar James and his recruiting profile, and a lot of success there in the state of Alabama, playing a linebacker spot, I really expect those two to lead that group of Scooby Williams and Derek Wingo, Spurlock, Jaydon Robinson. Let's keep it going. We'll go to the secondary. And Napier was asked about the safeties and said Kamari Wilson, Miguel Mitchell doing a good job, but he also shed some light on the depth and rotation on the back end. And this maybe comes as a bit of a surprise, but probably shouldn't, but maybe the name does. Napier added that Jaydon Hill was seeing time in that room at the star position. So star safety, Jaydon Hill. Seeing some time there. He admits they're a little thin at safety and star, and that's where young players can really make some headway this spring. You heard me bring up Sharif Denson last week, and because of that, as maybe a young player who can come in and make some headway because there's not a lot of experience. And then Napier's admitting it here too. And of course, I mean, this all you got to do is just look at a depth chart or a roster and see how how short Florida is on the depth pieces there at safety and star. So of course, a Sharif Denson, a Jordan Castell, a Bryce Thornton can make some headway there. A Jamarcus Weston moving there and flashing so far. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Wilson, Mitchell, of course, your top two guys right now making plays in spring practice so far this first week. Mentioned how those guys have had interceptions so far, but playing really well so far through the first week, and take that for what it's worth. First week, of course, and offense going through some quarterback changes. And as I said, we don't even know who the quarterback is when you hear about interceptions in spring practice. But those guys are making some plays so far. But Jaydon Hill does go in depth about Corey Raymond taking over in the secondary and how this defensive back room is shaping up.
With him being over working with all of us, it's like, everybody is hearing the same message, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's no gray area, you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Coach mentioned that you've been playing some with that group, with that safety star group. What's that been like, just playing inside?
It's been pretty good. I look forward to it, the challenge, you know what I'm saying? I feel like you can get after it right there, and I look to, feel what Travez just left. I look to feel his spot for him.
Yeah, and you've always been outside, but does an opportunity like this, do you take it as, well, this just shows the NFL that, hey, I can play inside, outside, I can be multiple?
Most definitely.
Where's Devin Moore at compared to where he was at last year? What have you seen from him over the last 12 months?
Oh, yeah. It's funny you asked that because I was just telling Ja the same the story about Devin. But when Devin first came in, he always used to be like, man, see Ray on my tail, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, bro, like, watch, your game going to get better so much, and you're just going to be like, dang, I thank you, you know what I'm saying? So right now, Devin, he's telling Ja that same message, but Devin game has definitely came a long way, you know what I'm saying? And just seeing how he's grown is great, you know what I'm saying?
C Ray's kind of tough love?
Oh, yeah. You're going to get it.
Seems like Kamari's kind of been a little bit more vocal in the secondary. Is he kind of stepping up as the leader going into his second year?
Yeah, with Kamari being, one of the oldest guys in his room, and he's only the upcoming sophomore, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like, yeah, he's accepted that role, and he's doing it at a pretty good high level, you know what I'm saying?
With the younger guys coming in, obviously a lot of talent coming in with this last recruiting class. What are those guys, which of those guys have really kind of showed out early on? Yeah,
I ain't gonna lie, I'm impressed with all the newcomers, all the guys who came in the spring. The boys came ready to work. Like, they kind of, like, surprised me. I'm like, dang, y'all boys, you know what I'm saying? But for my room, specifically, you know what I'm saying, Josh, Sharif, you know what I'm saying, the safeties, Bryce, Jordan, you know what I'm saying, them boys working, you know what I'm saying, and they getting after it. For the other positions, like, all of them. Well, more so for defense speaking, you know what I'm saying, the transfer, my boy Taraji, Dudes, all them boys getting out there, Jaydon, all them boys getting out there, you know what I'm saying, it's a whole bunch of names. I could just keep going. Kelby, Will, all them boys snapping. So.
What about Jamarcus moving to safety? That kind of surprised you a little bit. What are you seeing on him? Billy said he's kind of been flashing a little bit back there.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Like I was excited for him because you know what I'm saying. I'm just ready to see him, get out of his shell a little bit. And he's one of the Jamarcus is one of the most like gifted athletes I've been around. You know what I'm saying. And I know he can do it. It's just when he understands and gets it all done, I feel like he could be a good player back there.
And getting that opportunity, I know he's been waiting to
no doubt.
Receiver, now he has a chance to show what he can do.
No doubt. You know what I'm saying. I was just talking to him the other day about it, and I was like, just one day at a time, because he kind of felt overwhelmed. Like he feel like he got to get it all at once. You know what I'm saying. But it take time.
I saw you guys in the chat back there saying, it would have been probably beneficial for Corey Raymond to have the whole defensive back room last year. I agree with you, but also right now, the way it's playing out, definitely no better time than to make that move because you heard it. All the young guys that are back there, Florida needs some depth. And you have Kamari Wilson there, who is in his second year. You heard Jaydon Hill say it. He's in his second year, and he's got to be a leader in that safety room already. I mean, there was a lot to sell, and it's probably one of Florida's reasons of bringing in such a talented defensive back class in the class of 2023 because you were selling playing time like crazy back there. And these guys, Sharif Denson, Jordan Castell, Bryce Thornton, Jakeem Jackson, all these guys are going to be able to come in and contribute right away if they do their job. There are openings right there. I have full confidence Kamari Wilson and Miguel Mitchell is going to take most of those snaps back there at safety. But I mean, if you move now, Jaydon Hill, if he can break through and become a contributor there at star, what does that mean for Hill and Perkins? Does Perkins can he play some safety as well? I mean, I'm interested to see the rotation and how it works out there. Jaydon Hill, we were talking about it coming in as a big preview of who's going to take that second cornerback spot opposite Jason Marshall. Jaydon Hill, he might be getting some time at nickel, but he's also still competing for that cornerback spot, Devin Moore. But, if it works out where it is Jason Marshall, cornerback 1, Devin Moore, cornerback 2, and Jaydon Hill at nickel, I've got to see it, of course, but that gives you some experience at 2 of the spots with Hill and Marshall. Now, of course, Hill with a lot of experience at cornerback, but still some experience. Now, nickel would be a little new for him. Nickel star would be a little bit new for him. But if that gets Devin Moore as cornerback 2 and all the flash that he showed early on last season, and Hill was a third option at cornerback, that could work out to be pretty nice for Florida to go along with a lot of the young guys that are back there at the safety position and competing. But no better time than to have one voice to help all that communication in the locker room, during the games, on the field, than Corey Raymond being back there. And now it's time. You heard it brought up. It is definitely time. And I brought it up before when we heard about the position change of Jamarcus Weston being back there. And of course, this time of year, it is hopeful. You hope to hear all the positivity coming around. And you heard Hill talking about Weston being one of the best athletes on the team. Well, it's time to see that. He's making a position change. He could, as I said earlier, he could have transferred, but he wants to be at Florida, it seems like. He's going through a position change at Florida. But now it's time. If it didn't work out at receiver or kick returner, as we saw him at times before, it's kind of the last-ditch effort here. We've got to see that athleticism play out on the field. And maybe it gets unlocked here at safety. It's time to see Jamarcus Weston step up if that potential is there. And I like Hill being a leader there. Hey, and you don't have to get it all at one time. First of all, it's a new position. You got a lot to learn. You don't have to learn it all at one time. We'll bring you along. The staff will bring you along. Tough love from Corey Raymond, as you heard Hill say. But you also heard Hill talk about the guys up front. Well, let's hear from Justus Boone on a lot of those newcomers up front, transfers and freshmen.
Honestly, I have to say for both of them, they both have a very mature and a very attacking mindset. I haven't, for You feel me? Regular freshmen, they haven't been complaining or nothing like that. They come in and attack the work, especially Will Norman. He has a very competitive mindset. So just about every time you see him, no matter what he's doing, he's competing at it. Like, you putting your clothes in the bin, he's going to beat you to the spot. So, like, Kelby, the same thing. He's always competing, always giving all he got to. Big Cam's huge, and he moves amazing for his size. Caleb, for his size as well, he's an amazing pass rusher in my eyes. I think he does really well getting off the ball and executing moves in his mind before he even puts them on, so he does good at that. And like I said, Cam Jackson, the unit and the moving unit. So
he's played a bunch. Is that good for, like Chris and for Des to have someone like that that's playing their position, playing next to them, that can kind of lead them and teach them a little bit?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm pretty sure this is Cam's 4th year, so he has plenty of experience. So this year right here, he's pretty much in his prime. So he's got everything to teach and everything to learn at this moment. Well, right now I'm at the front of my position at the F position, and it's me and Kelby Collins and Cameron James. Like I said, for the most part, those guys, they've come in since day one pushing and doing everything as hard as they can, so that do not keep me on my toes and make sure I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do.
You heard Justus Boone say those two guys behind him, Kelby Collins, Cameron James, he's got to be a leader. I mean, those guys are true freshmen coming in, and this class up front Florida brought in, I'm telling you, I mean, they don't look like freshmen. Will Norman doesn't look like a freshman. Cameron James doesn't look like a freshman. Kelby Collins doesn't look like a freshman. And now those guys went through some winter conditioning, winter workouts, going through spring ball right now as early enrollees. You hope, I mean, Justus Boone, I saw Muddy Waters bring it into the comment section here. Saw a highlight of Boone beating Austin Barber pretty easily. Boone putting in some extra weight. Gonna surprise this year. I'm excited to see him there at the defensive end position, teaching those young guys along the way. Some of those highlights that we see from the offensive line, defensive line, a little bit situational as well, working on things with the defensive line and offensive line. But Boone's got to be, of course, got to be a guy that steps up this year as well. What was the Kentucky game where he had that big hit on Will Levis? I mean, we see more plays like that from one Justus Boone, but a leader up front there for the Gators. And I'll stress it one more time because we heard those guys he brought up too, those transfers. But Cameron Jackson is going to be a force for the Gators. I feel pretty confident in saying that. I mean, he was double teamed, triple teamed a lot at Memphis. The teams they play, they had to do that versus him because of how disruptive he is and can be. And he has shown that at Florida so far. And so now with more help and more talent around him, hopefully teams can't double team, triple team him so much because they have to worry about other players. I mean, that same happened to Jervon last year. Double team, triple teamed a lot, held in check a lot because of that, playing a lot of snaps as well. So Florida having more depth up front. That's why it's so important for these freshmen to come in and looking like they can play the part and then being able to play the part. Florida needs some more depth. Florida needs to be able to count on some guys playing some snaps. You can't have your defensive tackle, nose tackles playing 60 snaps a game. It just doesn't make sense. Production is going to fall off, and especially when you need it the most in the fourth quarter of games. Those guys are worn out. So Des Watson needs to be able to step up and play more snaps. Chris McClellan needs to be able to develop in his second year and play more snaps. These freshmen are going to have to be relied on, like Chris McClellan was last year, to go in there and play some snaps. So Cam Jackson's not playing 60 snaps a game. Good to hear that there seems to be some depth and competition in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That would lead me to what we get into next episode. The running game and some offensive line talk to continue that as well. We've been heavy offensive line talk the first week of spring practice. We'll get into it just a bit, but more in relation to the run game for the Gators as we hear from running back coach Jabbar Jalouk, ETN, Montrell Johnson as well. That'll be on the next episode of Gators Breakdown. But this was our big look at the defensive side. Competition everywhere, hopefully producing some more depth for the Gators. You want competition. It's going to make this team better. May even produce some prize names we end up seeing when the Gators take the field versus Utah next year or next season. But some good stuff there. We get to hear more from Austin Armstrong, about Austin Armstrong, from Billy Napier, the coaches or players. All the excitement that's coming from him. Hopefully it bleeds over into this defense, but certainly ready to see it all play out. All right, that would do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.